Well, I won't lie. This is a very scary talk. I suppose I won't waste too much of your time with this intro talk, but I do want to start off by saying anything I may consider to be not a game based on this video, that doesn't say anything about the quality of the product or even how enjoyable it is. It just is about how well it fits in this very arbitrary definition. There's plenty of digital art pieces out there that I would in no way call a game, but which I did truly enjoy. I guess we'll get into that in a moment though. So, let's do this. You might be inclined to pick up a dictionary and look up game, and just call it a day. So let's start with that, as per dictionary.com. Game. 1. An amusement or pastime. 2. The material or equipment used in playing certain games. It's always nice when you use a word you're trying to define in the definition. So this isn't going to get us anywhere. Let's try to get a better definition by ourselves. Where to start? Well, first, when I say game, you probably think of video games, but of course, the concept of playing games is way older than any video game, or video, or computers in general. What was the last time you played football, or soccer, as Americans insist on calling it, or maybe you're more into basketball? Well, those are sports, not really games. Okay then, what's the last time you played hide and seek, or tag? Those are much closer to what you think about when you hear the word game, aren't they? What all of these have in common is that they're a form of playing according to predetermined rules. And that by itself could be a pretty good working definition, but let's try to dive a little bit deeper. This is where we look to game designer Chris Crawford's definition of games. The first and most important part of a game is that it has to be interactive. Reading a book or watching a movie isn't a game. I think we can all agree on that. When something becomes interactive, we call it a plaything. It doesn't really have any set of rules to it, no goal, nothing to work towards. We call it a toy. Think about all those dolls or action figures you might have played with as a kid. Very fun, very interactive, not games. So, when something is interactive with a goal, is that a game? Well, not quite. This is what Crawford calls a challenge, which, as we've been doing so far, we can split into two separate things. Again, if there's no other participants involved, that's a puzzle. This can be a literal jigsaw puzzle, a Rubik's Cube, you name it. If, however, you do have more than one participant, you have a conflict. If, in a conflict, you're not allowed to interact with the other participants, think like just about any Olympic event, you have a competition. This is where most kinds of sports would be classified. This is where we slowly get back to soccer and basketball, for example. In those, you are allowed to interact with other participants, block them, work together, all that kind of stuff. This makes it a game. For our purposes, another participant doesn't have to mean another human. If there's an AI working against you, or with you for that matter, it's still a game. While there are some loose ends and broad generalizations in this definition, I think it's a good base to work off. It gives us a simple checklist to go through to check if something is or is not actually a game. This definition says nothing about reasons to interact, however. What if you're flipping burgers at McDonald's? You're certainly interacting with something, there is a goal, you're making a burger, but there are no other parties involved. So, is flipping a burger a puzzle? No, because it's a job. And while it might seem very obvious, I think including a check for voluntary participation at the very start of our checklist would be, if not helpful, at least make sure we're thorough. Next, I want to take a look at the goal-oriented part of our checklist. I think that this is just a little too general. What is a goal? I would, for the purpose of defining a game, like to change this requirement to including both a win state and a fail state. What do I mean by that? Well, a win state is pretty much the same thing you would generally think of as a goal. something you're working towards, the main reason for playing. In modern games, it's often not the end of your gameplay experience, but it is the driving factor. Think about the flagpole in pretty much every Mario game as a very clear example. Everything you do in a level is with the goal of getting to that. Touching the flagpole is the win state in a Mario game. But what makes a goal into a win state? Obstacles. In order to get to the flagpole, you must avoid enemies, bottomless pits, make very difficult jumps, and so on. Failing one of these obstacles can either stop you from progressing, make you retry that particular jump, or whatever it might be. Or it can introduce you to a fail state, where you get reset back to the start of the level, zone, world, whatever form you take. In some games, you might even have to restart the whole game. Putting obstacles with consequences between the start of your game and the end of it is an essential part of making a game a game. Without it, we get into the world of walking sim, a genre of game that was made up because these wonderful art pieces exist, but we had no real way to put them into a genre because, if you ask me, they're not games. Let's try another example, shall we? The Stanley Parable. Most people would very much call this a game, so let's go over our checklist. Voluntary participation? Yeah. Interactive? Very much. Does it have a goal? In other words, a win state? Yeah, it has lots. The whole game is based on the idea that whatever you do, it leads to one of the many endings. So, what are the obstacles? And what is the punishment for failing them? Neither of them really exists. You walk around, make a choice, and do whatever you do. It just leads to a different ending. No game owns. Even in the ending where you jump to your death, even in the ending where you glitch yourself outside of the map, they're all just alternate win states. If you take the requirement for both a win and fail state to be absolute, the Stanley Parable would not be a game. And I do think that is correct. Let's remove ourselves from a digital environment for the moment. Walking around an art gallery is in no way a game, right? Does that mean it doesn't have any value? No, of course not. Now imagine you're walking around in the exact same gallery, but in virtual reality. Does it now suddenly become a game because it is inside of a digital world? I would say no. Now, take the VR away and put it on a screen and give me a controller. Absolutely nothing about the gallery itself has changed. No sudden enemies that are shooting at me, no changes in the environment, nothing. The only thing that has changed is the way I see what's inside the gallery, and yet, the last version of the scenario, many people would without a doubt call this a game, simply because it's the digital world we interact with through a certain means. I see the Stanley Parable as much the same, a digital art piece you can walk around in, experience, enjoy, think about. But just because you're playing it on a computer doesn't make it a game. Now, back to computers, and an example that you could arguably say goes the other way with a game like Minecraft. Well, there's certainly a fail state here. There's plenty of ways to die in Minecraft, but is there really a win state, an ultimate goal you're working towards? You could say beating the Ender Dragon, and you wouldn't be wrong. But what about Minecraft when it was an alpha or beta? The change between the final beta version of Minecraft and the official release isn't that large. Yet, by this definition, one would be considered a game, while the other wouldn't be. This is all to say that yes, I am aware that even within my definition, you can still find holes and inconsistencies. But still, I would very much argue that, while beating the Ender Dragon is what makes people consider the end of the game, and it is the thing that makes the credits roll, Minecraft being a sandbox doesn't really have an ending. It's a game that lacks a proper clear win state. I'm sure you can see some issues with it. And it all comes down to the fact that as much as we try to narrow down words by defining them, we have to use other words in those definitions. What even is a win state? It's a rather vague term on its own, open to interpretation. Of course, I picked Minecraft as an example because it lives on the fine line between having a goal or just being a straight up sandbox. I recently did a retrospective on What Remains of Edith Finch, in which I said I wasn't really sure if I would call it a game. Let's go over this checklist one more time. Voluntary participation? Of course. Interactive? More so than many games I've played over the years in certain ways. Does it have a goal? Yeah, you're following the story and it does have an ending, so you can count that as a win state. Does it have obstacles? You do have to find your way around the house, so arguably, yes. But what happens when you don't get past those? Nothing, you just get stuck. There's no way to fail at this game, and as such, I don't think it's fair to really call it a game. So far, this checklist doesn't seem to be delivering us many positive answers, does it? Of course, all the examples we've used so far have been picked because they would return us with the answer of not a game. So let's pick a game at random. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask someone else to pick a game for me. Rayman 2! This should be fun. Voluntary participation. You get the point. Nobody is forcing me to play any of it. Interactive. And nobody is arguing against how interactive any of them are. Does it have a goal? Well, you go through each level until you reach the end. Then the game itself has a final boss and a credit roll afterwards. When you get hit too much by an enemy or you miss a jump, you get sent back to the last checkpoint or the start of the level, so we also have a fail state. Do we have other participants? Well, I mentioned them before, yes, enemies. Are we allowed to interact with them? They attack us, we attack them, so that's a definite yes. Rayman 2 gets a seal of approval and is now officially a game. Now, as I've said plenty of times in this video, I don't want anyone getting the idea that just because I argue against something being a game, doesn't mean it's got any less value or it's less entertaining. I loved every single one of the examples, and I'm pretty sure Minecraft specifically is the #1 piece of media that I've put the most time into. If anything, this whole video is little more than a thought experiment. Not to say that these products shouldn't be on Steam, because they are not games, or anything that you should avoid them for such reasons. Language is a complex and constantly evolving thing, so what we might consider a game a decade ago might be very different from what we think about being a game in another decade's time. Anyway, let's continue the discussion in the comment section down below. I'm very curious to hear what you think. Also, if you don't yet hate me, get subscribed, because I have a video just like this one planned, but instead of talking about what games are in general, I'm looking to ruin a very specific genre.